Welcome to the Sabbath School Rescue Podcast with your host, Buster Swoopes and Michael Campbell. This week in preparation for Sabbath July 19th, we look at Lesson 3, Rough Start. Join us as we explore the rough beginnings Moses had as he confronted Pharaoh.
The Sabbath School Rescue Podcast is hosted by Michael Campbell and Buster Swoopes at the Adventist Learning Community. Together, we love learning and have 18 years of pastoral experience, and now we have the privilege to dig deeper into the study.
All right, Michael, here we are, Lesson 3, Rough Start, and our memory text is Exodus chapter 5, verses 1 through 2. Afterward, Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, "Thus says the Lord God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness." And Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, nor will I let Israel go." So we see some very emphatic statements there. And Michael, you're going to take us straight there. Who is the Lord? Sunday's lesson.
Indeed. It's quite an interesting lesson as we look at it, and this whole idea of leadership and the whole Exodus saga. And sometimes things don't always go the way that we expect. Sometimes we can have these rosy colored glasses of what we think leadership can and should look like. And what we can see from this is that in this case, there's different authorities and appeals to authority. Who's your loyalty to? Pharaoh expects loyalty from the children of Israel and certainly does not recognize their God. So it's kind of a clashing of forces as the
It is.
story unfolds in Exodus chapter 5, and Aaron and Moses confront Pharaoh. And this is one of those moments I wish we actually really could see. I don't know, in the heavenly cinema replay, if in the millennium, I hope to have the chance to see this,
Oh,
like
man, that would be so
he's being
awesome.
right. I mean, and 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 they confront him. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says: "Let my people go, so they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness." And it's interesting. God is giving him a lighter test, like just let them go and worship me. He's not even asking them let stop having them be slaves or anything else like that. He's trying to meet Pharaoh somewhere. It was something a little bit easier. And of
Yeah.
course, verse 2, Pharaoh responds, "Who is the Lord, that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go."
Yeah.
So there is this immediate impasse, shall we say, Buster?
Yeah, I
No.
would definitely say so.
And so this sets the stage for conflict, and nobody likes conflict. At least I hope not. This is conflict unfolding as we go and look at these kind of next steps of how the rest of the story takes place. So Monday, I know, continues talking about that.
Yeah, so Monday's lesson is A Rough Start, which is the title of this week's lesson overall. And it asks this question: what were the immediate results of Moses and Aaron's first recorded encounter with Pharaoh? And we see it here in Exodus chapter 5, verses 3 through 23. So Moses and Aaron asked Pharaoh to let the Israelites go 3 days in the wilderness, sacrifice for God. Pharaoh refuses, and he accuses the Israelites of being lazy. And then here I have in my notes, Michael, he was going to punish them and discourage them from further requests, but Pharaoh orders that the Israelites must gather their own straw for brick making, and in other words, he makes them go above and beyond. They are already the bow's already breaking, and he was trying to break it even more. And so, because of the harsher conditions, they got mad at Aaron and Moses, saying, "You guys are trying to save us, and you're making things much worse." And so they started blaming them. And then it brings us down here to verse 21 that I really want to read. It says, "And they said to them, 'Let the Lord look on you to judge, because you have made us abhorrent in the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants, to put a sword in their hands to kill us.'" But we see here, Israel's deliverance is assured. So Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Lord, why have you brought trouble on this people? Why is it you have sent me? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people. Neither have you delivered your people at all." And so we see here Moses is still pleading, and it kind of gives us insight into our own lives, Michael. just because God is with us doesn't mean that our lives will be easy. And I know this goes once again anti-prosperity gospel. If things are going right, that means you're with God. If things are going wrong, that means that it means that you're away from God. Actually, we find in the scripture it's the quite opposite. When you're with God, that's when the enemy raises a standard against God's people, but God lifts up an even greater standard against him. But you see conflict in the Bible.
Mm,
Three Hebrew boys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we read a couple of lessons ago. God didn't save them from the fire; He saved them in the fire. And it's been so much easier if an angel of the Lord came and slew everyone and took them to heaven, and everything's fine, nothing ever happened to them. No, they were
mm,
willing to lose their lives in the midst of this great conflict. And we see here this rough start as well with Aaron and Moses. Moses kind of foresaw this coming, and that's why he was saying, Lord, why are you sending me? Because he knew this was going to be a battle, and a battle it is indeed. And so, Michael, now
mm.
take us to Tuesday's lesson, the divine eye.
Yeah, so this is kind of the really ultimate test of leadership, Buster, because Moses is doing what God asks, and then the children of Israel get mad at him.
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
this is the test of leadership. Leadership's fun when everything's going really well and everyone's happy and everything's hunky dory. But what happens when times get tough?
Yes.
And verse 22, chapter 5, Moses is a little upset at God here. Why have you brought trouble on this people? Why did you send me? And then he goes on to explain, ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he's brought trouble on this people. And you have not rescued your people at all. Like God needed to be told and reminded he needs to rescue his people. But this is a sense of leadership frustration in the midst of the pressure of the moment. He's done what God asks. And as you pointed out, Buster, I thought really well that, sometimes it seems like everybody expects God to be like Superman and instantly save them from every problem and that they won't have
Ooh,
any trouble. And like you said, God saves us not from the storm, but He's with us in the midst of the storm. And I like
yes.
that because I think that's kind of what's happening here is it's character building. God's testing the faith of both Moses and the children of Israel, helping them to learn and to grow spiritually. And then God responds to Moses. This is now chapter 6. Now you're going to see what I'll do to Pharaoh because my mighty hand, he will let them go. Because of my mighty hand, he will drive them out of his country. So not only is he going to ask them to go, eventually he's going to be like, just get rid of them. And and then God says again to Moses, this is verse 2, I am the Lord. And it reminds him of all this history, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as God Almighty, right? So I think what God often has to do is that he has to remind us and where we've come from and our identity. We don't know who we are. I'll tell you a funny story because I just came back from general conference session
Yes.
and really a wonderful experience. It's like the ultimate camp meeting, seeing people from all around the world. I've got a lot of my students from different countries I haven't seen in years. So it's very just refreshing to see that. So I'm helping out at the NAD booth a bit, just kind of wandering around and just being friendly, just trying to do what I'm supposed to do. And they forgot to print nobody made me a name badge, Buster.
Oh, no.
Oh, one of my colleagues said, here, this person's not showing up. Just grab their name badge. And so I'm walking around, I have a name badge. I know a lot of people. And so people weren't even looking at my name badge. But I had a friend and spent the whole time I was there just teasing me. Do you not know who you are? Where did you come from? You're a historian. Of all people, you should know. So finally, the last day, I got a marker and marked it out and just wrote in my name just to make him happy so he'd stop teasing me.
There you go.
And that's what we have to. It's like, okay, now you know your identity. Now you know where you come from. And I'm like, okay, all right. And but in a more serious way, God's trying to do that to Moses. Here's my name,
Yeah.
and here's the name of everyone I've interacted with in the past where I came from, my identity. And I've heard the groaning of the Israelites. He hasn't forgotten about the injustice in the world and all the problems that are in the world. We look around us and say, "Hey, seems like everybody's getting away with things." And God says, "No, I have not forgotten. I have not stopped paying attention, and I will do what I set out to do." But God doesn't obey us. It's at God's timing and ultimately his vindication that will see things as they truly were meant to be. So,
Right.
which kind of, leads us to Wednesday's lesson with uncircumcised lips, as God is still trying to teach them, and we kind of have the next part of this saga.
Right. So Exodus 6, 9 through 13, I think has such an important lesson, just like you shared there, Michael, and in Tuesday's lesson for us. And I'm going to go ahead and read it because it's a short passage, starting at verse 9 of Exodus 6. So Moses spoke thus to the children of Israel, but they did not heed Moses because of the anguish and the spirit of cruel bondage. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Go in and tell Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, to let the children of Israel go out of his hand." And the Lord spoke before, and Moses spoke before the Lord, saying, and listen to this: the children of Israel have not heeded me. How then shall Pharaoh heed me? For I am of uncircumcised lips. And what does he mean there? Well, let's read verse 13. We'll talk about it. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron and gave them a command for the children of Israel and for the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, to bring the children out of the land of Egypt. So basically, Moses was saying, I am inadequate at speaking. I am of no one. I have of no circumstance. I don't have power. I can't command him. Who am I to go and do this? And I think the lesson there that I was reading, Michael, is to not allow dis discouragement to blind us to hope,
Mm,
right? And, this is one of the things I admire about you, Michael. You shared several times in your life and ways that you've been discouraged, and yet you held on to hope. There's times where you could have thrown people under the bus, and you swerved out of the way instead. And I'm saying that for our audience as well. I'm hoping there's times in your life where you've seen yourself discouraged, but you look at the blessed hope that is Jesus Christ, and you kept on going. And so we see here Moses, he was very discouraged. He says, "I'm of uncircumcised lips," but God commanded him to go back, and what did he do? He went back, and he went back, and he went back. So it's not just about being discouraged, it's about doing what we're called to do in the midst of that discouragement, because also we realize that trials actually prepare us for deliverance. And so
mm,
this cruel bondage, and although it wasn't perfect in the children of Israel, because they still said, "Oh, we had food and we have meat to eat. We are in Egypt, right?" After the delivered, but we see that it actually prepared them for deliverance. They were so tired of being in this bondage that they were finally ready. And so just remember that this world is not our home and God's preparing for us, and don't lose sight of hope because of discouragement. And Michael, as I share those words,
mhm.
let's go to Thursday's lesson, like God to Pharaoh.
Yeah, so this is very interesting again, and by the way, thank you for those kind words, Buster. But I feel like you're the one that's been inspiration, persevering on so many times. So I just appreciate your friendship and example too. So, but the chapter 6, verse 28. The Lord speaks to Moses and says, I am the Lord, tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, everything I tell you. And kind of what you're just talking about, the faltering lips, right? That's that whole scene. But kind of that we have the next part of the story that goes on from there. He says, I've made you like Pharaoh, like a god to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet. So he's appointing a spokesperson. And this is very interesting because this helps us see a little bit, people ask, what's the definition of a prophet? Well, one of
Right.
the clear definitions is it's someone who speaks for someone else or is basically a spokesperson, right? So this helps us kind of see that a little bit. And as we kind of unpack this a little bit more, we see that Aaron will now go before Pharaoh. And he says, I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart.
Ooh,
And some people have kind of wondered, well, does this mean God foreordained and made sure that he would be prejudiced against and decide against God? And I think here what we're really seeing is God knows the future. He knows what everyone's decisions are going to be. And of course, his word comes through to to fruition. And but we'll see this. And he says, I you know, he will not listen to you. That's verse 4. and that there will be mighty acts of judgment that I will bring divisions between my people, the Israelites, and the Egyptians. So
Mm,
God is creating the circumstances so that eventually there will be just the right moment so that Israel will, in fact, leave. There will be a clarity that happens, the difference between God's people and the Egyptians, and God is calling them to live and move and head in a completely new direction. By the way, there's kind of an interesting thing here at the very end. It says Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord commanded them. So, okay, so they went from leadership crisis, we're being attacked. Children of Israel don't like us. We're getting in trouble, and blaming God for it to saying, you know what, okay, God, we're gonna do what you say. We're gonna listen and pay attention.
there you
And by the way, verse 7, awkward moment here for our culture. It says Moses, Buster, really, Moses was 80 years old and Aaron 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. And I don't know, I mean, reviewing the lesson here for our conversation, I forgot they were that old. And Aaron's, I guess, 3 years older. I guess we all knew that with the story, of his birth. But yeah, my goodness, 80 years old, and God has called him to leadership. And
Michael, this isn't political at all, but it sounds like a presidential election I guess you could say a couple months ago.
oh my goodness, yeah. So I mean, I don't know. Anyways, usually I hope by the time I'm 80, I'm retired, Buster.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Anyways, hold me to that.
Yes, I will, I will.
All right. Well, anyway, so the saga continues, and I hope what's really clear in this Exodus story, this lesson, as we've been talking about it together, is that leadership isn't easy. In fact, sometimes it's downright hard, and do I dare say painful?
Yeah, yeah, it's painful.
And that's the reality. Sometimes we're misunderstood. Sometimes you have your people you're supposed to lead, they're turning against you, but you see where they need to go. And God, in this case, is divinely leading and saying, here, pay
Amen.
attention. This is gonna work out in the end. Be patient, but God is playing the long game, not the short game.
Yes. Stay with me and I will guide you and lead you, right?
Exactly. So,
Right.
and as you listen, our listeners is wherever you may be in leadership, whether in the local church, in your home, or maybe a significant position of leadership in a government somewhere, or even in the denomination, that God calls us to be faithful to Him, and that again, leadership isn't always easy.
Right. And, Michael's was looking at this lesson. It's okay to have a rough start, but make sure you have
Mhm.
a finish, right? Stay
Strong
with the
finish.
Lord, and he will make sure you have a strong finish. And the ultimate finish is him coming through the clouds of glory and us being caught up with him.
That's why it's only lesson 3. I can't wait to see what happens next. But until
Amen.
next week, we invite you to come back and join us. But you've been listening to Sabbath School Rescue Podcast with your host, Sue,
And Swoops,
and we're signing
signing
out.
out.
As we wrap up, we want to give a shout out to our sponsor, the Adventist Learning Community, a ministry of the North American Division of Seventh-day Adventists.
You can join us each week by subscribing on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Also, make sure you share it with as many people as possible. And be sure to give us feedback by rating our podcast and go to our website, sabbathschoolrescue.org, for each weekly episode.